Okay, today we're going to be talking about comparing fractions to using our fourth strategy, which is benchmarking to a half. So that means we have already checked, are the numerators the same? No. Are the denominators the same? No. Can I make the denominators the same? Can I make equivalent fractions? No. So what we're going to do now is what's called the benchmarking to 1/2, which is you're going to decide, is the fraction less than 1/2, equal to 1/2, or more than 1/2? Because a fraction that's less than 1/2 and a fraction that's more than 1/2, if I had to compare them, it's going to be the one that's more than 1/2 is bigger. Okay, so our goal today is to compare fractions to 1/2. So that's the first thing we're going to write down, is compare each fraction to 1/2. Thinking about yesterday, we talked about, okay, this needs to be in your notes. Yesterday we talked about how to decide if a fraction was equal to 1/2. Okay, and we did that by whatever the denominator is. Let's say the denominator was 18. What's half of 18? Well, half of 18 is 9. Okay, what if my denominator was 24? Well, half of 24 is 12. So these fractions are equal to 1/2 because the numerator is half of the denominator. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so it's really important that you can figure out what 1/2 is given any denominator. Okay, so just cut the denominator in half to get your half. Okay, the first one that we're going to do is this one here, 5/6 and 2/4. So the first thing that you always do is write down the fractions that you have. Always label your picture. Okay. All right. So now what we have to do is compare each one to 1/2. So I'm going to have two number lines, a 6th number line and a 4th number line. So 0/6 and 6/6, 0 to 1. What is halfway between 0 and 1? If it's a number line that's 6th, what's half of 6? 3. And then I have another number line for 4ths that goes 0 to 1. And 1 whole, remember if I was talking about 4ths, how many 4ths make up 1 whole? Well, 4/4 do. Halfway, what's half of 4? 2. Okay, so now we're deciding, we're comparing 5/6 to 1/2. We know that half of 6 is 3. So is 5/6 more or less than 1/2? Well, common denominator tells me that 5/6 is more than 1/2. It's over here in that green, the more than 1/2 area. Okay, now I'm comparing 2/4 to 1/2. Well, in terms of fourths, 2/4 is equal to 1/2. So 2/4 is equal to 2/4, which is 1/2. So I have a fraction at 1/2, and I have a fraction that's more than 1/2. So the fraction that's more than 1/2, or 2/4, is going to be the bigger fraction. Okay, so you see how you're putting each one on the number line. Okay, it doesn't have to be in a perfect spot. It just needs to know, is it in this chunk, the less than? Is it in the equal to, or is it in this chunk that's more than? Okay, you'll get more into putting it precisely in a spot in 4th grade, but we don't have to worry about that this year. Okay, let's try another one. First step, label your fractions that you see. So I see 3/8 and 8/12. So now I'm going to make two different number lines. One that is 8ths and one that is 12ths. Okay, 0 to 1. what is 1 whole in terms of eighths? How many eighths make up 1 whole? Well, 8 eighths make up 1 whole. That's 1 whole pizza. If I have 8 slices and I eat 8, that's 1 whole pizza that I ate. In terms of twelfths, my twelfths number line, 12 twelfths make up 1 whole. Okay, so now we're doing the half. How many eighths are equal to 1/2? What's half of 8? Okay, that's why it's easy. Fourths. 4 eighths is half, because 4 is half of 8. Now how about in terms of twelfths? What's half of 12? 6 twelfths. Okay, so now we're going to compare each of these fractions to their half point. So 3 eighths compared to 4 eighths. We have the same denominator, so we're going to compare the numerators. 4 eighths is greater than 3 eighths, which means 4 eighths is bigger. So 3 eighths goes over here because it is less. 3 eighths is less than 1/2. The alligator is eating 4 eighths, which means 3 eighths is over here and less than that. Okay. Now 8 twelfths, in terms of twelfths, half is 6 twelfths because I remember I'm comparing to 1/2. Half is 6 twelfths. Common denominator, compare the numerators. I'd rather have 8 pieces than 6 pieces. So that means 8 twelfths is bigger than 6 twelfths. So 8 twelfths is going to go over here somewhere. And now I know that 1/2 is in the middle. So 3 eighths is less than 1/2. 8 twelfths is more than 1/2. So 8 twelfths must be the bigger fraction because 1/2 is in between. Okay, we have one more easy example and then one that's going to make you think. I know that we're already thinking a lot, but remember, we'll continue to work on this when you get to the table. So if you're having a hard time figuring out what's going on now, that's okay. All right, step 1, write down your fractions that you see. I see 5 eighths and I see 2 sixths. First I look and see, are the numerators the same? No. Are the denominators the same? No. Can I do 8 times something gives me 6? No. Can I do 6 times something gives me 8? No. So that leaves me with benchmarking to 1/2. So I'm going to compare each fraction to 1/2. So we have 2 number lines. One is eighths and one is sixths. Okay. Our number lines are going to go between 0 and 1. What is 1 whole in terms of eighths? How many eighths do I have to shade in to make 1 whole? Well, if I wanted to shade in, I would need to shade in all 8 eighths. So the 1/2 in terms of eighths is how much? What's half of 8? Well, 4. So 1/2 is 4 eighths. Okay, now let's do our sixths number line. So 0 sixths, what's 1 whole in terms of 6? If I have a cookie that was split into 6 pieces and I ate all 6 pieces, if I ate the whole cookie, I ate 6 pieces of the cookie, so 6 sixths. Now what's 1/2 of 6? What's half of 6? 3. Okay, so now our number lines are set up. Okay, we've got 1/2 on both of them. We're going to compare each one to 1/2. So we're going to start with the eighths. I know that 1/2 is 4 eighths. So I'm going to compare 4 eighths and 5 eighths. Common denominator, so we compare the numerators. I'd rather have 5 1/8 than 4 1/8. So 5 eighths is more than 4 eighths. So if it's more, it goes over here in between 4 eighths and 8 eighths. So 5 eighths is over here in the more than category. Okay, now I need to compare 2 sixths. If I come down here to my 1/2 on my sixth number line, it's 3 sixths. So Same denominators, so I'm going to compare the numerators. 2 pieces of 1/6 or 3 pieces of 1/6? Well, 3 pieces of 1/6 is bigger. So that means 2/6 is smaller. 3/6 is bigger, 2/6 is smaller. So 2/6 goes in between the 0 and the 3. So we're going to say 2/6 is over here. Now looking that this is less than 1/2, this is more than 1/2. So I'm going to say that the one that's more than 1/2 is your bigger fraction. So 5/8 is greater than 2/6. Okay, last example, and this one's is kind of a brain buster. So let's see what we can do with it. Okay, write down your fractions. We've got 6/10 and we've got 1/3. Okay, and this is where it's going to get a little trickier. All right, so let's get the tenths number line set up. So 0, 1/2, and a whole. 0/10. If I have a cookie that's broken into 10 pieces and I eat the whole thing, how many pieces did I eat? I ate 10 pieces. Okay, now I need to figure out what's 1/2 of 10. 5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and compare 6/10 to 5/10 before we go on to the third. So I'm going to compare to the 1/2. 1/2 is 5/10. Same denominator. So 6/10 is bigger than 5/10. So I'm going to put 6/10 over here. Okay, now 1/3. Number line that's broken into thirds. So 0/3 for 0. How much is 1 whole? If I have 3 slices of cake and I eat the whole cake, I ate 3 pieces. Now, can I do 1/2 in terms of thirds? Can I break 3 in half? I can't, which is where this becomes a problem. So I'm going to have to kind of start thinking about the fractions of thirds and how they compare to 1/2. So if I have 1/3, I'm comparing it to 1/2. Well, common numerator means I have this. What's fair is everybody has 1 piece. What's not fair is the size of the piece. So would I rather share with 3 people or would I rather share with 2 people? And here are my own kind of makeshift fraction strips there. Okay, 1/3 or 1/2. Okay, so 1/3 is going to be less than 1/2 because of common numerator. And you see that this half is kind of like halfway between the middle third. So really 1/2 of 1/3 or 1/2 of 3/3 is 1.5 thirds. We're not going to get into that, but I want you to just be able to think about, okay, well, if I have 1/3 and 1/2, because remember we're always comparing to 1/2, 1/3 is going to be smaller. Whoops, wrong color, sorry. So we have to kind of, with odd numbers as the denominator, we kind of have to use our strategy of common numerator in order to figure it out, which makes it a little bit tricky. Okay, so 6/10 compared to 1/3. 6/10 is larger, and so 6/10 is larger than 1/3 because 6/10 is more than 1/2. 1/3 is less than 1/2. Okay, make sure you bring this to the table with you when you come to the table because we're going to be continuing working on this. So if you don't understand right now, it's okay. Don't be frustrated. We'll get there. All right.